All right, so welcome to the video for the discussion answers on mixed groups. So this video should be watched in class on Wednesday, November 4th. You should have already done your discussions in class, and this video will hopefully help you to clear up any questions you might have about any of the questions that you discussed in class today. So we're going to go through each question and I'll answer them briefly. If you feel like you need further explanation, be sure to talk to me tomorrow when I come back and we can go over the questions in more detail if you'd like. So let's go ahead and talk about number one, compare and contrast the properties of metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. So up until this point you've talked about metals specifically, we've talked about nonmetals specifically, and we've talked about metalloids as well. So today in your question number one, you were kind of supposed to compare, contrast, talk about what are the differences, what are the similarities. So let's start with metals. Their general properties are they're shiny, they're malleable, they're conductive, they're ductile. Those are some of their general properties. They're mostly solids. There's one exception to that, which would be mercury. Nonmetals typically are dull or not shiny. They're not conductive, they're not malleable, they're kind of the complete opposite of metals. Typically nonmetals are liquids or gases. Metalloids are kind of the in-between group. They have some metallic properties as well as some non-metallic properties. So for instance, some of them are what we call semiconductors, which means that they do conduct heat and electricity, but not very well or only under certain conditions. So those are kind of the three different big groups on the periodic table and their properties and how they compare to each other. Right. Number two, what is the name of group 13? What are some uses of the elements in group 13? So group 13, their name is the boron family or the boron group. Some uses of the elements in that group, boron specifically is used. One of its uses is to create what's called heat-resistant glass. That's often used for some of our labware that we use in class, actually. Aluminum, obviously pop cans, aluminum foil. Aluminum is also used for, to create metal for cars and airplanes and other things like that. And then gallium would be another one that is used often in electronic components. So those are some of the uses of group 13. Number three, what is the name of group 14? How many valence electrons do they have? Group 14 is called the carbon family. These are all easy ones to remember here because the name of the family is just simply the element that's at the top of the group. So group 14 is the carbon family. They have 4 valence electrons or electrons in their outer shell. Question 4, what does the word organic mean in terms of chemistry and what element is present in all organic compounds? The word organic basically means related to living things, so compounds that are found within living organisms. And the element that is present in all organic compounds would be carbon. There's one key thing to note though, that not all carbon compounds are organic, but rather all organic compounds contain carbon. Okay, so it goes one way but not the other. Number 5, what is an allotrope? Give at least 2 examples of allotropes of carbon. An allotrope is essentially just a different molecular structure of the same element. So carbon, for example, has multiple allotropes, meaning that they're all made up of carbon, so they're all the same substance, but their molecular structure is different. So the way the atoms are arranged, they're arranged in different ways. And I'll show you an example of the buckyball here in just a second. So allotropes of carbon, there's a few examples of that. Graphite, diamonds, the buckyballs. There's a few other examples, but those would be some examples of carbon allotropes. Okay. On to number 6 here. If I can get my slide to move. There we go. So number 6, explain what a buckyball is and where it got its name. So a buckyball, like I just mentioned, is a certain allotrope of carbon. This is what a buckyball looks like. So it kind of has a soccer ball structure to it in a way. So these are how the carbon atoms within a buckyball structure are arranged. So we talked about the fact that an allotrope is simply a different structure, atomic structure, or not atomic, I shouldn't say, molecular structure. And so this buckyball is just one example of a type of allotrope of carbon, and this is one way in which the atoms are arranged within the molecules. Let's go back to our questions here. Where it got its name from R. Buckminster Fuller is his name. It's the guy who, not the guy who actually discovered it, but rather an engineer or architect who was building buildings at the time that kind of resembled the shape of the buckyball, so kind of a round-shaped building. It kind of looked like the buckyball, so they named it after him. So it's actually not the person who discovered it. Number 7, what is a semiconductor? And identify an element that is a semiconductor and what it's used for. So semiconductors are able to conduct heat and electricity, but they only conduct it under certain prime conditions. And so they're not great conductors of heat and electricity, but rather they are kind of okay conductors. They're not nearly as good as metals. An element that is a semiconductor and what it's used for, silicon and germanium are both examples of semiconductors, and they're both used in many electronic devices. Number 8, what is the name for group 15? How many valence electrons do they have? Group 15 is called the nitrogen family, and they have 5 valence electrons. Number 9, explain why bismuth is used in fire sprinkler heads. The reason that bismuth is used in fire sprinkler heads is because of its ability to be mixed with a metal, and as a result of that, it lowers the melting point of that metal. So if we look at a sprinkler head here, this little red thing here is what essentially melts or breaks in the event of a fire. So this would be the area where the bismuth is mixed with a metal to lower the melting point. So obviously we would want it to have a lower melting point so that if it gets to a fairly low temperature but still significantly warmer than room temperature, then we want that to break and allow the water to flow out of there. If it doesn't break and doesn't allow the water, then the sprinkler is not going to work. So the bismuth is mixed with metal to lower its melting point so that it will melt in the event of a fire. Let's go back to our questions. Number 10, what is the name of group 16 and how many valence electrons do they have? Group 16 is the oxygen family, and they have 6 valence electrons. All right. So again, like I said, if you have more questions on these, feel free to see me tomorrow or make a note next to a question and we can talk about it when I come back tomorrow. But otherwise, these are the answers to your discussion questions for Wednesday, November 4th. And I will see you in class tomorrow.